Hi, this is Donna Amos with the International Association of You. I want to thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Telling Your Business Story Today and Creating That Brand Story. So I'd like to ask you, how many times have you been fascinated by a good story? How many times have you stayed up late, reading a novel that you couldn't put down, or watching a movie that you just couldn't turn off? How many times have you, pushed yourself harder because you heard a story of someone else's success? Or have you changed your mind after reading a convincing article or listening to a good debate? Now, there's no doubt that stories can change the way that we think and act and feel, and especially leaders can use the power of a good story to influence and to motivate their teams to new heights. So stories can inspire everything from understanding to action. So how are you using stories in your own business? Does your team have you shared your story with the team? Do they buy in? Are they experiencing the same story that you are in the business? Those are the kind of questions that I'd like to help answer today, and go through what you can expect from the webinar. The purpose and objective of today's webinar is we're going to talk about some of the technologies you can use to get in touch with your audience. And some of them may make you uncomfortable initially, but they can be great tools to help get the story out there. I want to share some tips on how to become a great storyteller, and share a couple of case studies with you to help demonstrate how you can use stories to tell your business story. And understanding that we all have a story. Every one of us has a story, and we should be sharing it. So let's first look at the technology. Well, this is just a brief introduction. The technology is just the tools that we use to express our story and to reach the audience that we're looking to reach. And you have to make sure that you select the ones that best fit you and your organization. And it won't be the same for everyone. The first thing that we need to talk about is audio. Audio is a huge way to engage your audience. It forces you, the teller, to be creative and to pay attention to the words, your inflections, the sound, the language, all of those things. But audio is also very intimate. And when you hear somebody's voice on a podcast, a webinar, it seems as if they're talking directly to you, that the message that they're trying to convey is intended for you as an individual. You can't see who else is listening, who else is in the in the room, so to speak. So audio is a great way to connect emotionally with your audience. And we're going to talk a little bit more about emotions later, but it really is how we all make those buying decisions. Visual. Now, visuals can be a couple things. It can be digital, it can be in print, or it can be in video. And if you think about it, images really speak louder than words do. The images and the inflection of your voice can actually make a bigger impact on your listening audience than the words that you're speaking. Especially in today's, image-centered world, think about how popular Pinterest has become, because we're sharing images, and those images tell something about us. The things that we like, the things that we don't like, the things that make us laugh. Pinterest, when you think about it, really kind of tells a story of you as an individual. Or a business if it's being used for business purposes. So think about your audience, and would they be more impacted by a video than by an audio? Or do you need to be using both? images can show things differently, and they can show different things. So keep that in mind when you're determining what medium, what tool, technology tool will you use to express your story to your potential customers, clients, and understanding that using a combination of some of these tools might be the best thing for you and your business. I mean, think about how much easier it is today to create digital magazines or to publish your own book. And so using ebooks or digital magazines or self-publishing a printed book can make an impact on your audience, as well as podcasting and video casting. So let's get into a couple of these case stories. The one that I really love is Blendtec. I don't know if you know who Blendtec is, but it's a blending company. They make blenders. And they have been around for a while. But in 2006, when they hired a new marketing manager, George Wright, they didn't have the market share that they hoped to. And he was hired to do a better job of getting their message out there, their story out there. And he started walking around the plant, looking for, just paying attention to what was going on within the company and looking for the right story. What was the story that he needed to get out there about Blendtec? And what he realized was that, he kept seeing this stack of 2x4s and, and then of course this sawdust all around. And so he finally asked one day, what is this? And in fact, Dixon, the owner, the CEO of Blendtec, would use, this was his unique quality control technique. He would take one of the blenders off the, the assembly line, so to speak, and throw 2x4s in it. And if it did its job and it chopped up those 2x4s, then it was good to go. And he would, would send, send it off out to the, marketplace. So when Wright heard about that, he thought, that's our story. We could make he wanted to let people know that their blender was not just a regular machine. No, it's not the same machine that you would go into a department store and buy off the shelf. So he took $50. This was his marketing budget, $50. He bought a lab coat, and then he bought some marbles, a rake, a 6-pack of soda, a fast food meal, and golf balls. He set up his, his video camera, tossed the lab coat to Mr. Dixon, and put him in front of the camera. And then he asked him to take each one of those items that he had purchased and blend them. And he took then those individual stories of what Blendtec blender could do with golf balls or a fast food meal, and he began their YouTube channel, and it was called Will It Blend. And he used a series of YouTube videos that began in October 2006. Now, this has been a while ago. I mean, that's 6 years ago. But I wanted to show you how powerful storytelling can be when it's done consistently and frequently. So let's share some of the numbers as to what that has developed into. Will It Blend, their YouTube channel. Now, they have another channel too, which is Blendtec Recipes, which is probably those individuals that have purchased the blender, so looking for new recipes. So Will It Blend, they currently have 199 million views of their videos in 6 years. That's huge. There's 426,000 people that are subscribers to their channel that look for, the next great thing that they're going to stuff in that blender to show off. This particular video that's on the screen was Doritos Jacked. Now, I didn't watch that video, so I'm not sure what that really means, but 148,000 people, or maybe somebody's watched it more than once. So there's been 148,000 views of just that one video. I would say that Blendtec has done an excellent job of sharing their story and getting it out there, that their blender is not just like any other blender, that there's a difference. And they've demonstrated it by telling the story. And as you can see, Mr. Dixon here in his lab coat, so they've done a great job with that. So think about that. What's the story of your product or service? And how could you tell that story differently to attract your target market? Now, it's very possible that when people first started watching their videos, they weren't in a market to buy a blender. But I would almost guarantee you that once they had seen this videos a few times, or they, finally their blender blew out and they needed to be in the market, that Blendtec was the blender that they would consider. So think about that. What's your story? And how can you tell that story differently to attract your target audience? Here's another story for you. This was the Copyright Clearance Center. And they're a licensing firm. And they use a weekly podcast called Beyond the Book to help establish their expertise in the publishing industry. I would probably assume that a lot of people that subscribe to this podcast are also in the publishing industry, and that's actually a good thing for them, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So the director of business development decided that he would host a podcast, and he knew that he wasn't always going to talk about copyright, but everything that goes into publishing finally comes down to that, right? So who owns what and what they can do with it to maximize their return on it. So they use the podcast series, and they will interview other people within the publishing industry, and so it helps them. Again, when you associate yourself with other successful people within your industry, it helps you to look like you're successful as well. And so that's what they have done. Initially they had attended this they were going to have conferences and invite these same publishing people, but it's hard to get people into a quarterly conference series called Beyond the Book, same name, fitting everybody's schedule. So they decided the podcast would be an easier way that they could reach many more people, and they could do it for a lower cost, and they were right. Because in the first, their first podcast, only 60 people downloaded the podcast during their first month, and that was in 2006 again. But today, they've had about 18,000 people that download it each month, which has impacted their business. And here's why: because they're now the people in the industry, the other publishing people in the industry, see them as expert when it comes to copyright. So who do they refer to when they have a client that needs copywriting work? Certainly they contact the Copyright Clearance House. So that's one way that you can use podcasts to get your story out there and to develop an expertise in your market area, so that people see you as the one to turn to. Another story that I love, and it's not on the slide here, but is the Orabrush company. Now, I don't know if you've seen the email that went out a week or so ago, but the Orabrush company hired, well, they didn't actually hire, they contracted with some college students, and it was for a marketing project. They had the students create their marketing campaign, and they then used YouTube videos. They created videos based on their campaign, and their campaign was that they wanted to rid the world of bad breath. That was their story. And so they told the story in many ways using video, and used those videos to connect with other businesses. And I can't remember the whole every step that they took, but the bottom line, what they ended up doing was getting their product in every Walmart across the country, which as well as I do, was huge. And they did that without a huge marketing budget. It was all done using very simple tools that are available that they could use to tell a good story. And the college students had a blast creating the marketing strategy and their little characters and everything. So worked out well for everybody. All right, so let's talk about how are you telling your story, and or are you telling your story? Oftentimes we think that we need to be talking in marketing speak to get people to buy what we have to offer. But the fact is, today's world, most of us don't want to be sold to. I would say pretty much no one wants to be sold to. And there's a lot of distrust when it comes to advertising, because we feel like we've been sold a bill of goods in many instances. So we're really weary of advertising messages. So for your story to really impact your ideal audience, you need to be authentic. The best storytellers talk from their hearts. And you can tell when they are inspired, when they are passionate about something. So stay, you have to, don't try to be fake. Don't try to fake the emotion, because your listeners, your viewers, they're going to eventually see through it. You might get it past them for a short time, but eventually they're going to see you for what you are, and your story will crash and burn. And that's a harder recovery to come back from something than to tell a good story and something that is authentic and from your heart in the first place. So be passionate. Really think about why is it that you're doing what you're doing? Why did you start? And once you did, what has kept you going? We have, if you go to the associationofyou.org website, there is a tool under the Join Now tab that says Voice Wheel. And that voice wheel will help you kind of measure where you're at in the different areas of your storytelling, so that you can see your biggest gaps and start changing the story that you're telling. The other thing that you have to do is you have to pay attention to your audience. Now, if your stories are too long, they're generally boring, and people shut down. So you have to be maybe entertaining, or they have to see real value in the story that you're telling. So, don't go on forever. Just, pay attention to the audience. And here's the key. You need to know, who the audience really is. Who is it that you need to be connecting with? And you can't know that if you haven't done, your homework. Very often, especially for new business owners, they think their audience is everyone. But you can't possibly be, everybody's everything. So really think about, who's your ideal target audience? What problem do they have that you solve, and how can you share the story about that? Your story might be about customer service. And who in the audience would, what audience do you need to impact that will see value in that, in providing great customer service. So then you need to really look at, and this kind of goes back to the being authentic as well as, what's the story really about for you? Why do you want to tell that particular story? What does it mean to you? And does it have the same, the story, does it have the same meaning to everybody in your team? And it may not, and that might be okay as long as they understand the heart of the story, and then letting people tell it in different ways, because if we go back to good customer service, you might, it might be about the fact that you experienced terrible customer service in the hotel industry, and so now you're in that industry, and it's your goal to make certain that you're top shelf when it comes to customer service. But for your staff, it may be about the stories that the customer tells them when they're coming and going, and so they may tell the story completely differently than you do. But once you find the heart of the story for you, you'll also automatically find the passion in it. And once you find the passion in it, your story will be more authentic and come across to your ideal target audience. So take the time, figure out what that story is, and what does it mean for you. My partner Tony Reese said over the last couple of years, as we've kind of evolved, what we're doing here is the one thing that we have found is that a lot of businesses, nonprofits, organizations that we talk to don't think they have a story to tell. And I would tell you that everybody has a story to tell, and that your story can impact somebody else. The other thing that we've discovered is that people are very reluctant to use something new to tell that story. So, using podcasting or video, and I think they're more worried about the use of the technology than how they're telling the story. So those are the easy pieces that we can help with. Here's the bottom line. You have to help create an experience for your listener. Remember that when you tell a story, you're creating an experience for the listeners or the viewers. And you can't just use, sound words, but you have to use the other senses as well. Help them to see it and taste it and smell it, and make sure that the pictures that you're painting are really telling the story. So don't just tell them, but tell them, paint a picture for them so that they can really see how powerful your story is. Okay, now here's the key deal for the first two case studies that I spoke to you about. That both of them began telling their story in 2006. I wanted to help demonstrate for you that it takes a long time to build up the kind of numbers that those particular companies have, and it'll take you a while as well. So don't be so attached to the numbers, how many people are viewing or how many people are listening, or don't get so attached to that. Just be consistent and frequent. And it's just like, when we used to get newspapers every day, we expected it, right? And you knew that it was going to, show up on the front porch, and you would go read whatever piece of the newspaper that you wanted. Same thing with your magazine subscriptions. You knew that, I know that HGTV is going to show up in my mailbox about every 5 to 6 weeks. I like knowing that that's going to happen. So your podcast or your video viewers or your readers will have the same expectations that they will hear you on a regular basis. And if you don't deliver that to them on a regular basis, then you're going to lose them. We are so drowned by messages today in today's world that if we don't see anything for a while and then it shows up, and that happens to be the Monday morning that we're overwhelmed with stuff in our inbox, then we hit the delete button or we hit the unsubscribe button. So you will have more success, just like with email marketing. You will have more success if you're consistent and your audience knows exactly when they're going to, hear from you. They'll come to expect it, and if you're providing good content, they'll come to appreciate it and look forward to it. The other thing that you need to do is really, and I mentioned this, but you really need to determine who your audience is. Think about what information, the people who you're trying to reach, what information is important to them. And typically that's not a commercial about your company. And they might listen to the commercial once or twice, but if that's all you're producing, then they'll shut down because, again, there's too much stuff coming at us. How many times do you DVR something and then fast forward through the commercials because you really aren't interested in watching that? So make sure that you're delivering good content that is the information the people who you're trying to reach want, and that they're willing to give you space in their lives to share that information with them. Once you have created your story, you know what the story is, you're developing your podcast, your videocast, your publications, then it becomes about promotion. And promotion meaning just sharing. Sharing it everywhere that you think your target market will see it. So, of course, on your own personal website, of course, through social media, whatever social media channels you use for your business, you need to share that that you have that information available, and add it to the bottom of your email signatures. So every time you can put it in front of someone, you should do that. Use QR codes on, if you're using direct mail pieces, use QR codes that direct them right back to your podcast or videocast, so they don't have to work so hard to get it. So find the channels where your target market is and then promote the heck out of it. You might even want to use, paid advertising to get in front of an audience, the audience that you want, faster. So using Google AdWords or ads on Facebook, other things like that. The other thing that you have to remember is to be patient, because, like I said, it takes a while to build up an audience for a podcast or a videocast, or a publication to catch on. We've been publishing Solopreneur Solutions for Life and Business, which is a digital magazine, for a couple years now, and we have 3,000 plus subscribers now to the digital magazine, which is excellent. I mean, I'm thrilled with those numbers, but it took us a while to get there. It's probably been over 2 years since we started that. So so be patient. It's very seldom that that a podcast, videocast, becomes a huge hit. That doesn't happen very often. But don't get caught up in the numbers, because you don't need 10,000 random people to listen to your podcast if they're not interested, if they're not looking for the information that you're sharing. But if you're a thought leader to 1,000 people who really see you as somebody that they look up to and that would spread the news about what you're doing, that is going to be much more impactful for you and your business than that 10,000 random people. So don't get so caught up in the numbers. Be patient. Know that that it will get, it'll continue to get better, but only if you're consistent and frequent with it. So make sure that you do those two things. I want to share a little bit why Tony and myself chose to enter the storytelling arena, and tell you that that wasn't initially our That wasn't our purpose initially. We didn't, let me put it this way, we didn't know that was our purpose initially. We were both coaches, and we knew that we could assist business owners, nonprofits, individuals with getting clear about, the message that they wanted to put out there in the world. And we knew that through coaching and through some of the models, the tools like the voice wheel that we have available to us and that we've used over the years, we know that we can help people to get better at that. Then it evolved. It evolved from the coaching, which is, that's step one in our process. We provide the coaching. But then it evolved to, then how can we help them to get the message out there? And that's when we started looking at the different tools and then providing the platform for those podcasts, videocasts, publishing to be, part of the platform, and then for us to then do the marketing to help support the individual client. So I want to share with you just a few of the clients that have joined us that that we're very pleased with what they've created and the success that they're having. Michael Crossland is a young man from Australia, mid to late 20s. Michael has been struggling with cancer since he was a young child, but he is definitely a fighter, and a fighter that has one of the most positive outlooks on life that I've seen in a long time. And what Michael's podcast does is shares his the lessons that he's learned in his very short time, but he shares those lessons specifically his, who he wants to impact is the high school and the college student that maybe is not giving it everything they have, or maybe doesn't believe that they can, do everything that they want to do. And when you listen to Michael's, podcast, they're inspiring, and they make you want to, get up and do something bigger and better than what you're doing today, with a kind heart, and and care for others around you. So very unique young man, and Michael has been so successful with this podcast that they are being broadcast within a Mercedes dealership in Australia, so that the salespeople and and customers, everybody, can hear Michael's podcast when they're published. So that's one success story that we're just extremely happy with, that we're proud to have Michael as part of our team, so to speak. The other one is Maddie. Maddie is 12 years old. Maddie has a condition called alopecia, and which is she doesn't grow hair on her head well, and pretty much she is bald, and her father is also bald because he shaved his head to support his daughter. But Maddie's 12 years old, and they have created podcasts where Maddie is the host, and she is interviewing other people with alopecia, with children, caregivers, adults that have lived with it all their life, and really help to, it's about the education process, but at the same time it's so inspiring to see this young girl. And when I heard her on her first podcast, and you could tell she was a little timid, and then she has just blossomed. It just is amazing to me that she has the strength and the inspiration and the joy that she has. It's just wonderful to listen to. So if you haven't listened to any Maddie's podcasts, I'd encourage you to check those out. Finally, I want to share with you Barb Canelli. Barb is a fiction writer, and she writes stories of Italy, romance and Italy. And she first came to us, her first book had been published, and we created a book trailer for her. It's part of one of the services that we provide. We created a book trailer, and then we also do the distribution of that book trailer to drive traffic back to the book or the podcast or the videocast, whatever the platform is. So we did that for Barb. She just purchased the book trailer, and the distribution model. And she immediately got new sales on her book. So when she wrote the second book, she came to me and said, okay, I need the same thing you did for me, but I need more of it. So of course we did a new book trailer about the new book, about Italy and the romance and everything that goes with it. But then we also, Barb created podcast where she shared short stories of Italy, of her experiences, and in story form, and to help people get a taste of what they're going to find within the pages of her book. And that has been extremely successful for Barb. And when you listen to them, you go to Italy with her. She just takes you right there. So she has also done a great job. We have some nonprofits on the site that are doing excellent at sharing their stories and getting a larger audience for what they're doing. So the platform can support really anybody that has a story to tell. And we help through, our process is the coaching up front, plus we're available every month for a coaching session for our clients. So you get the coaching up front. We help you with the format of your program, defining what that is, getting your story clear, and then giving you the tools, the easy pieces for you to do your, tell your story, whether it's podcast, video, print, whatever you have decided. And then we do the editing. So we, top it and tail it if that's necessary, or just top it depending on the platform. And we upload it, so you don't have to worry about any of the technology stuff. And we then do the promotion to help drive traffic back to your story. So the promotion being, we use video marketing to help drive traffic back to the individual stories, as well as weekly we use video trailers to drive stories back to the channels and spotlight the different hosts on the platform. So I hope that makes sense. And here's takeaways. I want you to remember that everyone has a story to share, and that it's important that you share it, because there are people that need to hear it. That consistency in your story across the organization is extremely important. When I think about consistency in an organization, and the people within an organization be inspired by, I think of Steve Jobs. He was a great storyteller, and getting his people on board with him. So they believed they could do the impossible, because he believed they were going to do the impossible, and they would do the impossible. Because that was the story that they all bought into. So consistency across your organization is important. And then know that your story is about the good work that you do, and it's not about you. When you focus on the good work, then the listener, the viewer, will feel and connect to the passion. And it's that emotional connection that will make the sale, meaning that it's because they connect with you emotionally that they'll even consider doing business with you. That's how we all make buying decisions, and that's not going to change. So talk about the good work that you do. Now, if you're ready to get started now, or if you're not sure but you'd like to have a 30-minute complimentary consultation, I'd love to chat with you. You can send me a couple of days and times that you're available to donna@associationofyou.org. Or if you're ready to go right now, you can get a discount to membership for the association for being on or listening to this webinar. Current pricing is $197 a month, but you can get the special of $147 a month by using the URL on the screen, which is www.associationofyou.org/special-discount. So if you have that URL, go directly that, make your purchase, you'll get that $50 off a month, which is $600 a year that you'd be saving. Here's the best part. There's no contracts. You start with this for a month and you decide that this isn't going to work for you, no worries. You should know that every program on the association has its own page, so that you have your own URL that you can drive traffic to, as well as that we do the same as for you. All right, I want to thank you for joining me today for the webinar. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and we hope to see you at the associationofyou.org. Thanks so much.